I feel like every NFL team at some point in time goes through a period where they have a bad or just okay quarterback, and a lot of the times when they win games, it's in spite of the quarterback play. And with my Baltimore Ravens, of course, before Joe Flacco and Lamar Jackson got to town, the Ravens were winning games despite their quarterbacks being less than stellar and having less than stellar performances most of the weeks. And I compiled 14 games from the Ravens that they won despite their quarterbacks being an absolute nuisance. Now, what do I mean? Well, in all but one of these games, the quarterbacks have 0 touchdowns, and they barely did anything, but because maybe the Ravens' run game was good, or maybe because the defense made some plays, they were able to win the game. And the first instance I could find where I felt like a Ravens quarterback was carried to a victory was Week 10 in 1998. The Ravens were taking on the Oakland Raiders, and the Ravens won this game 13-10, but their quarterback Jim Harbaugh went 10 for 17 for 102 yards and a pick in this game. He didn't really do much throughout the season, and the Ravens went 6-10, and Harbaugh was basically one and done in Baltimore, so there's no surprise here. Then we go to the Super Bowl season in 2000, or at least the first Super Bowl season, and after Tony Banks kind of struggled his way through the first 8 games, the Ravens did have a 5-3 record. They decided to move on from Trent Dilfer, and a lot of people are like, he was carried by the best defense in NFL history, blah blah blah, and I do get that, but really I only found 2 instances where I can say Dilfer didn't really do anything, and yet the Ravens won. Week 16 of 2000, the Ravens were in Arizona taking on a bad Cardinals team, and somehow the Ravens eked out a 13-7 win. You know, Jermaine Lewis was out in this game because he was dealing with the death of his newborn son at the time, and of course Trent Dilfer was just awful, going 12 of 22 for 70 yards and an interception, but because that defense was so good, the Ravens were able to come out with a win. And then in the divisional round of that year, in 2000, the Ravens were taking on the Titans, and you look back at when Trent Dilfer took on the Titans in Week 11 of that year in Tennessee, he actually had one of his better games, throwing for over 280 yards, helping the Ravens to a victory in that game, but this time around in the divisional round, yeah, he won in spite of the team. He went 5 for 16 for 117 yards, and sure, he didn't turn the ball over, he didn't throw an interception either, and of those 5 completions, there was a big 56-yard throw and catch that he had to Shannon Sharp. That was most of his yards. But get this, though. The Ravens won this game 24-10. They won it by 2 touchdowns, mainly because they were able to get a field goal offensively and then a short field touchdown. And then, of course, Anthony Mitchell infamously returned a blocked Del Greco kick for a TD, and Ray Lewis had the pick 6 toward the end of the game to officially lock it up. So Dilfer did literally nothing outside of one throw, and the Ravens won the game by 2 touchdowns. Then we have to fast forward 2 years later, Week 12 of 2002. Jeff Blake is now starting for the Ravens, and wouldn't you know it, they're going up against the Tennessee Titans, this time at home, and in a 13-12 win. 13 seems to be a very common number for the Ravens in these games. Blake went 11 of 24 for 109 yards and an interception. Again, a game that just was ugly from the start, and Jeff Blake, although was okay as Ravens quarterback, he also had his bad moments. Now we're getting to the Kyle Boller era, and there was quite a few here. As a matter of fact, there's 4 instances, I would say, where Kyle Boller didn't really do anything and the Ravens won. And I get Kyle Boller's a pretty controversial quarterback in Ravens history because he wasn't great, but he had some really good games, and he had games where he at least did something to help the team win. But in these 4 games in particular, he wasn't the reason for the Ravens getting the victory. Week 2 of 2003, this is Kyle Boller's 2nd start ever, and in a Ravens win that was a 20-point victory over their rival, the Cleveland Browns, 33-13. Kyle Boller was 7 of 17 for 78 yards and an interception. But we all know this is the infamous game where Jamal Lewis ran for 295 yards. So you can see why Kyle Boller didn't really do anything, because he didn't have to. Then later that year in Week 6, the Ravens are back in the desert in Arizona, and in a 26-18 win, Kyle Boller went 9 for 18 for 75 yards. I believe in this game the Ravens had a pick 6 and a blocked punt return for a touchdown, so that was where pretty much majority of their points came from. Then we go right to the next season, and here we are, Week 2 again. I'm telling you, there's something about Week 2 for Ravens quarterbacks where they just don't really show up. The Ravens beat their division rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers, 30-13, and lo and behold, that would be the Steelers' only regular season loss that year, as this would be the game where infamously Tommy Maddox got hurt, Roethlisberger stepped in, and they never looked back from there. But in this game, Kyle Boller was 10 of 18 for 90 198 yards, so actually a little better than what we've heard from him, but again, he wasn't the reason for the victory. And then the last time I would say the Ravens won a game in the Kyle Bowler era in spite of him, we have to go to week 7 of 2004. The Ravens beat the Buffalo Bills 20-6 in a game where Dion had one of the 2 TDs on a pick 6, and BJ Sams came in for an injured Jamal Lewis and got a rushing TD. But in this game, Kyle Bowler was 10-19 for 86 yards, and for the 3rd straight game, didn't throw an interception, but he also didn't have any touchdowns either. He was just kind of there. There's a couple games as we get to the Joe Flacco era where I would say the Ravens carried him to victory. Week 3 of 2008, the Ravens coming off of their unofficial bye because they were supposed to play the Texans in week 2 in Houston, but because of the hurricane going on, their bye week became week 2 and they would play the Texans in week 10. So technically, this is Joe Flacco's second start. The Ravens in their second game at home beat the Browns 28-10. Flacco, completion percentage-wise, was okay. He was 13-19, threw for 129 yards. But 2 ugly interceptions in this game, and the Ravens were actually down 10-7 at halftime, but they had 3 rushing TDs in this game and a pick 6, as pretty much most of these games have had, and the Ravens were able to win easily. Then the next time I would say he was carried, we got to go to week 17 of 2009. The Ravens were in a win-and-in situation when it came to the playoffs, and they were playing a lowly Raiders team. The thing was, though, Flacco the week before had injured his ribs against the Steelers, so he was coming in with the hope that he didn't have to do much, and well, he didn't. In the Ravens 21-13 win, Joe Flacco was 11-19 for 102 yards, so at least he threw for over 100 yards and again didn't turn the ball over. But then the very next week, there's an infamous game because there has never been another time in Ravens history where a quarterback for the team has had this low of passing yards and completions in a full game, and the Ravens won. The Ravens went into New England having never beaten the Patriots before. Patriots had never lost at home in the playoffs with Belichick and Brady at the helm, and the Ravens came out firing. Ray Rice ran 83 yards for a touchdown the first play. The Ravens were up 24-0 in the first quarter, and they would go on to win 33-14, kind of managing the game, and they ran for almost 300 yards. But that must mean Joe Flacco had to do something, right? Well, he was 4 for 10 for 34 yards and an interception. That's right, the Ravens won this game by 19 points despite Flacco doing that. But again, it probably had a lot to do with his hurt ribs, and considering we just kept upping the score in the first quarter, all he really had to do was manage the game, and outside of the one mistake, he didn't screw up. So there was that, and plus Tom Brady had arguably his worst playoff game of all time, so somehow, some way, Joe Flacco still outplayed Tom Brady in the playoffs. And then the last time I would say Joe Flacco was carried to a win, we gotta fast forward a little bit. Week 1 of 2017, Joe Flacco has an injury in this game, and the Ravens were again kind of hoping that he didn't have to do much, and the Ravens went into Cincinnati and they shut the Bengals out 20-0. They ran for 157 yards as a team, and of course forced, I believe it was 5 turnovers, a fumble, and 4 interceptions by Andy Dalton in this game. And Joe Flacco, well, he did what the other quarterbacks we mentioned have not done. He did throw a TD pass as he went 9 for 17 for 121 yards, a touchdown and an interception. But again, outside of that TD pass to Jeremy Maclin, most of his passing yards were just short, sweet, and to the point, and he didn't have to throw much because the Ravens were trying to, well, not have him get killed while he was still injured, and he did his job there. And then since the Lamar Jackson era, we've had some games where Lamar's stats look weird, but he always seems to, get touchdowns on the ground or run for 100 yards, this, that, and the other. So with Lamar, I don't think Lamar has ever been carried to a win. I feel like when we win with Lamar, it's either he's having a stellar performance or he always is in the middle of, doing something, and the defense is good and the run game's doing its thing. But there are 2 games during the Lamar Jackson era where I would say our quarterbacks got carried to a victory, and they were 2 games where Lamar didn't even start. We go to week 17 of 2019, Lamar's MVP season. The 13-2 Ravens, already having the playoffs, the 1 seed, and the AFC North clinched, decided to rest a majority, pretty much all of their starters for this game, meaning that backup RG3 was set to make his first start as a Raven. And in the season finale, the Ravens beat the Steelers 28-10 to knock the Steelers out of the playoffs. Griffin was actually okay. I mean, you look at his passing stats, 11-21, 96 yards and a pick, nothing spectacular, but he did rush for 50 yards on 8 carries, so at least there's that. But he didn't have a TD. I believe we kicked 4 field goals offensively. Defense and special teams also did a lot more than the offense did, and that's why I put this game on here. And then the last last game I will say where a Ravens quarterback, or should I say quarterbacks, were carried is Week 14 of 2022, once again against the Steelers. This time we're in Pittsburgh. We had lost Lamar to an ankle injury the week before, so Tyler Huntley is getting the start. Ravens were 8-4, and if you remember the year before, they had only won one game out of the, I think it was 5 that Lamar Jackson did not play in. So there was some sort of, worry about how the Ravens were going to do. And, well, the Ravens beat the Steelers 16-14. After having a 10-0 lead in the first quarter, the Ravens offense kind of slowed down. They did pick off Mitchell Trubisky 3 times, but the Ravens had to use 2 QBs in this game because Tyler Huntley, who was actually pretty good, was 8 of 12, 88 yards in this game, got knocked down because of a concussion, meaning that rookie Anthony Brown was coming in to make his first snaps, and all he had to do was not screw up. And he threw 5 passes, completed 3 of them for 16 yards, and again, no turnovers. This was a game that featured 4 quarterbacks because Kenny Pickett was also out early. That's why Trubisky was in. But the thing was, Ravens quarterbacks made 0 turnovers, while Mitchell Trubisky made 3 by himself, and the Steelers had many opportunities, just didn't take advantage. And this would actually help the Ravens make the playoffs, and the Steelers would miss out on the playoffs by a game. So this was big for both teams, and the Ravens did it despite not having their MVP quarterback at the helm. And since Lamar has been fully healthy the past 2 years, I wouldn't say that he's been carried to a win in any of his starts. That this was the last time that I remember recently where I said, wow, we won in spite of our quarterbacks. Not that going 11 of 17 for 104 yards combined, Huntley and Brown, is bad, but they didn't really do anything to make me go, this makes me confident if we get to the playoffs. But yeah, those were 14 games in Ravens history where the quarterbacks did little to absolutely nothing, but yet the team still won because of other things that went right. You can tell me in the comments below, what are some games from your favorite teams that, you wonder how you won because your quarterback was just so god-awful in that game, but yet somehow, some way, they found a way to win. And most of the time, the offense doesn't even score the touchdowns. Maybe there's a kick return, a block punt, or just something crazy that happens that, sets the team up for victory when they shouldn't have won because their quarterback is awful. Or Ravens fans like myself, maybe there's another game that you remember specifically where you just go, how did we win that game? Like the quarterback play was so bad where you're just going, we won this game and yet we really shouldn't have. But those were the 14 in particular that I looked at and went, yeah, I feel like the quarterbacks really didn't do anything worth note in this game for me to go, yeah, we won because of them. But until then, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you all in the next one.